All right, here we go. Today's video is going to be a continuation of our last video. I still want to do the internet's most popular high-protein cookie recipe. There's one ingredient I still can't get a hold of, and I do not want, when we do the live taste test, for anyone to have a Roger Maris-like asterisk. I can't. I'm terrible with THs and S's. I don't want there to be anyone saying, "Oh, you didn't make the recipe exactly right, Shank." So I'm going to wait for that one ingredient to get here. There were enough questions, though, about the last video. We can make a whole nother video out of it. Actually, make like 2 or 3 videos out of this. So let's get going with that, and then we'll just go from there. The first question I got a couple people ask me this, mainly younger people. They want to know what a leather daddy is. Now, just to remind you, our first video was on basic program design. And I was going over the basic program design I made for a guy who was a leather daddy, who would like to go to leather dances. The point of that video and how it relates to my clients is whether you want to be a leather daddy, a professional baseball player, a world-class bodybuilder, or just an average person who wants their life to function better. For the first 3 to 6 months of your programming, the basic structure, maybe not the exercises and weights that you lift, but the basic structure is essentially the same. That's why how I trained a leather daddy was relevant to how I train a accountant that's into bird watching. Now, you can also be an accountant into bird watching, also be into leather. That's not the point. You get the point. Several people will ask me what a leather daddy is. So a leather daddy is a man. I haven't met non-male leather daddies. I'm sure they're out there. Maybe they're called leather mamas. I don't know. But it's typically a man. In my experience, they tend to be into the more spicy side of the human sexual experience. The leather almost acts like their uniform. Think of it like a football player. They wear a helmet and shoulder pads to go play the game of football. Well, a leather daddy would wear leather to play the more spicy side of human sexuality. Daddy tends to denote dominance. This is very important because this is going to come up in a second. A leather daddy typically tends to have leather boys that work for him. You can determine work however you want. It could be something as simple as doing the dishes and getting the groceries to I don't want to get into it. Daddy means dominance. It does not mean age. You could have literally an 80-year-old leather boy who is being dominated by a 30-year-old leather daddy. Right? It's all about mindset, but isn't it always? So that's the answer of what a leather daddy is. Leather, dominance, likes to dance, but now you know what a leather daddy is. And typically, under all that leather, you want to be a mask. You want to be a more masculine, more well-built. So weight training can be very important to the leather daddy's whole look. There's only so much you can hide in a harness. Another person asked me to go over the 7s and 5s again. And I know the lighting is horrible this week. I tried my best. I really got to start investing more. I got these lamps. I got another lamp from the basement, but it doesn't seem to be doing very much. This one's starting to get hot. I'm going to burn my damn finger live on air. So someone asked me about the 7s and 5s to qualify that a little bit more. And if you don't remember what that was all about as far as basic program design is concerned, the 7 and 5s were all about the simple formula of what it takes to build muscle. If you want to build muscle, you got to do 3 things. You got to provide a mechanical stimulus to the muscle. Right? That could come in the form of weights. That could come in the form of rocks. Bands, it doesn't really matter. Sorry, this thing locks out every few seconds if I don't renew it. You have to provide a mechanical stimulus to the muscle. Once you provide that mechanical stimulus, you get a chemical reaction in the muscle. I can write the whole thing out. Reaction in the muscle, which then results in an adaptation leading to the development of muscle mass. So let's go over that again. If you want to build muscle, 3 basic rules. Mechanical stimulus, leading to a chemical reaction, leading to an adaptation. I'm going to play with the lights a little here, so just humor me. I really need to get to Target and buy some better lighting. Maybe if I put this up here, it would help. I don't know. Let's see. Put too much glare. Lamp brought to you by Helen Norton Thompson. Thank you, Helen Norton Thompson. All right, put this one over here. Very nice. There's only one problem with this whole mechanical stimulus thing. And that is the mechanical stimulus is an adaptive response. What does that mean? Well, in order to keep getting this chemical reaction, you have to apply heavier and heavier and more load because the body will adapt to this mechanical stimulus. The level of mechanical stimulus, think this is something as simple as a 50-pound dumbbell lift 10 times, might be enough in the beginning to get your body to give a chemical reaction, but because the system adapts, right? See, there's a little adaptation to adaptation. Actually, it really only goes that way, but whatever. Because the system adapts, the mechanical stimulus has to increase. There's one other thing about the mechanical stimulus. It must be of sufficient volume and intensity. And that also is adaptive. That goes up over time. So to cover the volume part of it, that's where the 7s and 5s come in. And that kind of confused me because I thought it was kind of like how what's that supplement thing that people like, oh, DM me about my secret diet. They won't come out and tell you what it is, Optavia. Right? Anytime someone's like, look at my amazing body and how sexy I've become, and then you're like, oh wow, what workout diet are you using? Like, DM me for the information. It's like, just so you know, that's Optavia. I'm blowing their cover. Where was I? I don't know where it was. I got so upset about that. I don't remember. But anyway, so you got to adapt. Oh, okay, I got it. So I thought this whole 7s and 5s thing would be kind of cool because the Optavia people all talk about lean and green, right? That's their cool kind of catchphrase. And all that means is lean protein and vegetables. But it sounds so much cooler when they say lean and green, right? You can do that motion right there. I thought this was the same thing. I thought we were going to love it, but I had so many questions. People had no clue what the frig that meant. So let me make it a little simpler. All right. Let me make this a little simpler. Whatever volume of weights you lift, and we made the example of for a beginner, say they want to start with their chest. They need 9 sets of chest done every 7 days, once every 5 days. Now, to me, this makes perfect sense. But to other people, it doesn't. And that is kind of fine by me because algebra has never made any sense to me, but other people think it's fantastic. So let me break this down a little bit better. Essentially, what this is trying to say is you do not want to do all 9 sets on the same day. To put it much simpler, you want to spread all 9 sets out over 7 days. If you're a beginner, I don't want you big, juicy, beefy bodybuilders like, well, I do chest day, and I do back day, and Shank, I'm way bigger than you, and then you hit the obligatory pose. Congratulations on you and all your aromatizing supplements. I'm talking about beginners here. I'm talking about people trying to build a little muscle, try to stay functionally independent as long as possible, trying to be a little harder to kill. I'm not talking about someone who wants to go to the Jersey Shore holding their drink like this, doing this all jacked up in tight shorts. That's not who I'm training. For those advanced populations, you might be able to do all your chest work on one day and you're fine because you have skill and you know to generate intensity. Or I'll show you intensity, I'll crush you. Whatever, dude, right? The bottom line is for beginners, the 9 sets needs to be spread out over 7 days. It helps better with skill acquisition. They don't work as high an intensity as the beach tan laundry guys. Right? So they need their work spread out more to get a proper chemical reaction and adaptation. So that's it, simple as that. 9 sets done every 7 days, 9 sets done every week, spread out evenly throughout the week. So instead of doing all 9 sets on Monday and then not doing it again until the following Monday, what you would do is 3 on Monday, 3 on Wednesday, 3 on Friday. Oops, that's a 5. 3. 3, 3, 3. You're just mixing it up a little bit. Right, this light's really starting to annoy me. It's really not giving me that much light anyway. 3, 3, and 3. You just spread it out. So the total volume for the week, which is 7 days, is 9. And you want to spread it out over the week so you're working your chest at least once every 5 days. Which, day 1 day in between, chest. Another day in between, chest. That's less than 5 days. That's only 1 day in between. 1 day in between. Saturday and Sunday is only 2 days in between. So hopefully that makes sense of that. Again, doesn't apply to the big, powerful bodybuilder types. They can use a wide variety of approaches. But for the beginners and intermediates that I work with, every 7 days, get the total volume, spread it out throughout the week so you hit it at least once every 5 days. If you even want to do something like a Monday, Thursday split, in which you did 5 sets of chest on one day and 4 on the other, you still get your 9 sets in. But it's done at least once every 5 days because there's only a Tuesday and a Wednesday between that, which is 2 days, and a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which is 3 days. Again, both fit within that once every 5 days format. So that's that explained. So let me erase that. Someone else had asked, well, what about core training? Because if you remember the program that I wrote, the basic beginner program, it involved 1 exercise for 7 areas. It involved 1 exercise for chest, 4 back, for front of the thigh, for back of the thigh, for shoulders, oops, let me write that out, for buys, and for tries. Now remember, the reason why I left calves out is because when I was writing the specific program for the Leather Daddy, he had naturally big calves, and if his calves got any bigger, they wouldn't fit inside his custom-made biker boots. And the whole idea behind that is you design the program around the client, not the client around the program. That's Scott Abel's thing. I'm not stealing that from him. That's his thing, and he's right. So for him, I had to eliminate calves because that's not the way the program worked for what his need states were. Sorry, I left tea. So we eliminated calves. But then someone said, hey, Shank, what about the core? So I'm going to cut this one short and just say we're going to do a whole video on core training. But I don't want to leave you high and dry. So let me tell you this, that every exercise, if you're lifting weights or working against resistance with rocks, I don't care, Rocky IV doing overhead tricep extensions with a rope and military presses with human beings in a cart, dragging alcoholics around in the snow on sleds. What was I going with that? Oh, every exercise is a core exercise. Now, there are isolated core movements that you will do, and that's what the whole video that I'll do separately will focus on. But remember this, when you're resistance training, every exercise is a core exercise. Why do I say that? Well, because your spine is a flexible rod. Make sure it's still recording. It is. Your spine is a flexible rod. Your femur's not a flexible rod, and I made the analogy that's why cavemen beat each other to death with femurs and not spines. I know because I was there. So you need to protect that flexible rod when working against external resistance, or it will buckle and eventually break. At minimum, it will make the ability of these rigid levers of your arms and legs reduce the amount of force they can produce, because all you have to do is watch a football game where these world's greatest athletes play in the rain and they can't generate nearly the speed or force. Very important that every exercise is a core exercise when you do resistance training. Look, when you do things like yoga, depending on the pose you're doing, you may not want your spine to be a rigid bar. You may want it to be mobile and flexible, but here's the deal. Yoga is not weight training. Some poses are a little more weight training-ish, but for the most part, you'll see hot yoga, you'll see chair yoga, you'll see goat yoga, but you'll never see 95% of 1 rep max yoga, because you wouldn't last very long. You'd kill all the athletes. Let me leave you with this. Whenever you're doing exercise, I don't care if it's a leg extension or a split squat or a squat or a deadlift or a bench press, the simple thing I will leave you with before we get into our whole core video is I want you to take these 2 fingers, and I got this from a guy named Stuart McGill, and if I'm doing this wrong, may his mustache forgive me. I'm sorry. But this is what I heard him say, and then I used it in the gym thousands and thousands of times, and it worked. Take these 2 fingers and poke yourself right in here in your obliques. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to squeeze against that poke. Already you can hear the difference in my voice, and I'll go into this more detail in the core video itself. You have now buttressed your core. That means anything you do, let me get back a little further, whether it's a squat, a split squat, a shoulder press, a bench press, a bicep curl, God help you, even a leg extension, you've now protected that flexible rod that is your spine while the ass-kicking rigid levers create force. So that's why every exercise when it comes to resistance training is a core exercise. Yes, there is isolated work. Yes, there is planes of motion, which I'll get into in a little bit because other people wanted to see me expand upon the Leather Daddy's workout program. But let's leave it with that. So if you want to do the drill, again, just take your 2 fingers. Take a marker if you don't like touching yourself. I don't have that problem. I can't go there. Push in first and then squeeze around that push. Now I know there's advanced powerlifting techniques that use something slightly different. Look, those guys like lifting Ford Broncos. That's not what we're doing. All right, so it's poke, squeeze, and hold. If you have an issue with blood pressure, as with anything, I don't care what your issue is, I've always said the only screen you have to do is go see your physician first. But if you're given the clear, poke, squeeze, buttress. Now you've protected your flexible rod. Keep it that way throughout the set, and you should minimize any problems you have. All right. So now we took care of that. Again, that'll be a future video, probably because it's going to take forever that protein ingredient to come in stock. So don't worry about that. So we got rid of the 7s and 5s. We explained to you how that means just you have a set volume and you want to spread it out evenly through the week. If you're a beginner, I didn't mean to insult any of the guys at the Jersey Shore. I apologize. I want you to pummel me. But it's just what works for you is not necessary for most regular people. Now, the next thing people want to do, and we'll close out with this, because again, I'm under strict Devin Peterson rules. And again, I don't see this as oppression. I'm seeing this as listening to someone who's more competent at this than I am. Sorry, this thing locks out every now and then. I got to fix it. And when I'm under pressure like this, sometimes it pauses. So some people want to see me expand upon the Leather Daddy program design beyond the whole body routine. How this applies to most of my clients, it really doesn't. But I know there's some people out there who took interest in this. They want to see, hey, what if I wanted to take my weight training to the next level? What would I do? And when you're doing this advanced routine, what are you really worried about here when it comes to building muscle beyond the basic formula, right? Is planes and ranges of motion. This is something else I learned from a guy named Scott Abel. And what that basically means is muscles work through multiple planes of motion. So 3 planes are forward here, this is called sagittal. Then you have frontal, side to side. And then you have transverse, which is twisting. Why is that relevant? The muscles work through all 3 of those planes of motions. Likewise, muscles work through all different types of ranges of motion. A couple examples of that. Your bicep flexes your elbow from this degree of what's called arm extension, right? My bicep still works. It flexes the elbow here, and it flexes the elbow here. The bicep flexes the elbow through different ranges of motion. The tricep does the same thing, but it extends the elbow. So when I'm in this degree of extension, my tricep extends the elbow. It extends the elbow, it extends the elbow. I one time, and all the time been a trainer, actually met a guy who had a birth defect where he was missing a bicep in one of his arms. So he had a unicep in his one arm. He had no long head in his right arm. So if he wanted to flex his elbow on this side, what he would have to do is literally go like this and then flex his elbow up. Right? So he just had a short head, so his arm would only flex here, but he couldn't get it up past this point. So it would be that, and then he would be able to flex like crazy here. Or maybe it wasn't even missing it. It was, for whatever reason, it was so atrophied that he couldn't use it. Now, I don't want to get into someone's personal medical details as to how that is. I'm sure there's someone out here watching that who can explain it. I know one of the guys, Kevin's a physical therapist. He might know what the hell that's all about. But that's a perfect explanation. I'll give you another example. Take a muscle that has more complexity to it, the chest. The chest has fibers that connect on your breastbone or your sternum, which when they shorten, pull the arm this way. It has fibers that connect on your clavicle or your collarbone, which when they shorten, bring the arm this way. And it also has muscles that connect down to the costal region, the rib region, which bring the arms down across this way. Now you may say why would the body be so complex? The more complex something is, the more typical it's going to break down. Well, unless you want to be a harbor seal, you need clavicular and costal pec fibers. Or the only thing you're going to be able to do is this, right? Human beings were evolved to use tools. We don't just use monkey symbols. So you need to work through multiple planes and multiple ranges of motion, right? Your lat muscle. Your lat muscle does a thing called arm extension. When it shortens, it brings your arm this way. It also is, some people argue, the lats really don't do a ton of adduction shank. Whatever. They also adduct the arm. More so in some people than others, depending on the length of the iliac fibers of your lat. That was so stupid. I'm going to impress myself. Just understand the lats do this and they do that. Let all the trainers go and do what I would say, twist their nipples about all the specifics. This has no relevance to you. Sorry, I need more tea. I'm all excited. So for Leatherman, because he wanted to maximize his level of muscular development, once he got beyond the basic whole body routine, he needed to do enough volume of exercise that he could work his muscles through every plane and range of motion they were capable of. So for the biceps alone, that meant he needed 3 different exercises to work with an adequate volume and intensity to get the development he wanted to get. So while he followed the whole body routine for about 6 months, we came up with the goal of coming up with 4 different whole body routines. And you say, why 4 different whole body routines? The reason why is he needed at least enough exercises for each body part, again, to work them through every plane and range of motion. So for his pecs, he needed at least 4 different exercises. Well, really 3, but we gave him 4. For his triceps and biceps, at least 3. For his shoulders, got even more complex because we used to do shrugs. We used to do work for the front of his shoulders, his lateral shoulders, and his rear delts. So he needed 4 exercises for his shoulders. So he used to put his traps with his shoulders, whatever. Don't do his traps are in his shoulder muscle, whatever. The bottom line is if you overload the muscle correctly over an extended period of time, muscle will be built. So don't get all caught up in these insane details. This is what the fitness industry exists for. It's to spin its wheels. So once we got 4 different routines, we had enough of a collection of exercises. I think it was like 27. It was like we had 4 for back. Let me add this up. I'm terrible at it. We had 4 for back, 4 for chest, 4 for quads, 4 for hamstrings, and then we had 3 for biceps, 3 for triceps, and then we had 4 for shoulders. All right? So that comes out to, how many does that come out to? 16, 20, 26 different exercises we had for him. That allowed us now that once we went to the next level of routine, we had enough movements to work every plane and range of motion. I know you're getting sick of hearing me say that. That was necessary to maximize his muscle mass. The other thing we did was we took him off of a whole body routine and put him on a push and a pull routine 4 days a week. And the reason why we had to do that was his volume got so high. So he went originally from 9 sets, for just an example for chest, to 12 sets to 16. Now, because he tended not to work with high levels of maximal intensity, he actually got up to 20 sets of chest, 12 sets of biceps, triceps. So his chest, his back, his front and back of thigh were literally 20 sets every 7 days. Every 7 days. And his bi, tris, and shoulders were 12 sets every 7 days. Now, this varies. If you have a client who's really high strung and is a real intense person, these numbers will drop dramatically because they can generate enough intensity, they couldn't even possibly do this amount of work. But again, like Scott Abel said, you do not build the program around who you want the client to be. You do not build the program around who you think the client should be. You asshole. Stop telling people who they should be. Just because you're all jacked up and you do everything way too intensely does not mean that everyone else does everything way too intensely. Jay Cutler is one of the best Mr. Olympias ever. He was more of like a moderate to high intensity volume guy, whereas Ronnie Coleman, who was also one of the greatest bodybuilders ever, was a complete psychopath and destroyed the weights. Dorian Yates was the same way, whereas Lee Haney, you guys have no idea what I'm talking about right now, I'm just ranting, so just go with this. Lee Haney was another guy, right? He was a guy who was more into volume than doing crazy amounts of intensity. His motto was, this guy was the greatest bodybuilder in the world of his era in the 80s. And his motto was, get this, stimulate, don't annihilate. People go, well, he's got great genetics. Well, there's a lot of people with great genetics who suck. So obviously the guy knew something that worked for him. But the bottom line is, we had to up his volume from where he was as a beginner. Why? Because the body was going through an adaptive response. His body had adapted to 9 sets, so it no longer felt the need to create the chemical response to get the adaptation to build muscle. It wasn't being bitchy. It was adapting, right? Muscle is incredibly costly. You have to give the body a real good reason to add more of it. So he had to go from 9, 12, 16 to 20 based on his relative intensity level. Now, that required him to spread the routine out over 4 days, since doing this amount of volume and this amount of volume for these body parts over 3 days done in a whole body routine just was prohibitive from him. He couldn't recover from it. And I know there's people out there saying, oh, I do whole body routines with that kind of volume. Again, remember the Scott Abel quote. You build the program around the client, not the client around the program. This is the way I build the program for them, because it's the way it worked for them. Most people have lives. They can't go out and murder themselves in the gym and then recover and go about their day. This guy was a very busy businessman. He didn't have time. He had time for 2 things, business and leather, all right? So he didn't have time to be worrying about recovering from workouts, doing ice baths, doing an hour of foam rolling every night. So that's why you had to divide the routine up into 4 days, because we had to do the adaptive response, we had to jack his volume up, respectively, in these different muscle groups. Now this is interesting, because this is kind of a little play on whatever. This went on actually for a year. So we spent 6 months doing the whole body routine at WB, just so he would know enough exercise to work every plane and range of motion to make this push-pull routine work. That took 6 months and 6 months of whole body and 6 months of push-pull, which equaled 1 year. Now, he made tremendous gains in this program, which I always laugh about, because you always see these things like 90 days and 120 days and 30-day challenges and all this stuff. And that's really cool for fitness magazines and people who don't know, don't sound so arrogant, who don't know much about fitness. This is the kind of thing that sells in magazines, but when you've been around weights long enough, you laugh at this stuff. Because you realize this guy wasn't doing P90X. He was doing P365X. And that was just to get him through the first level. He wasn't even beyond intermediate level at this time. P365X. This actually was a 2-year program, so it was P730X or whatever it is. I don't know. What is that? 365 times 2. 600, 720. It was P in the end, it was P730X is what he was on. So after the first year, we sent him off to his leather dance, and he looked tremendous. He just wasn't as big and as cut as he could be. So the next year, what we did was we started right where we left off. We didn't need a whole body routine because he already knew how to do all the exercises. He just needed to up his volume a little bit. Actually, on specific body parts, that's a whole other animal, which I'll get into later about how to design specialization routines. If you want any of this stuff right now, the greatest podcast ever recorded is a podcast by a guy named Lyle McDonald called oh God, what the hell is it called? I'm calling it the greatest podcast ever, and I can't even remember it. It's called, I can actually hear the guy's voice. He's got a British or like Australian accent, and he's interviewing him. Oh God, what the hell is it called? Oh, the bulking routine, the intermittent bulking routine. I'll put it in the show notes. That's very embarrassing. I'm telling you, it's the greatest thing ever. I can't remember it, but I'm under a lot of pressure right now. So what we did for the first 6 months of year 2, all right, so remember, year 1 was 6 months of whole body just to figure out enough exercises to work enough planes and ranges of motion. Then there was 6 months of intensification using a push-pull routine at higher volumes. In year 2, we spent the first 6 months slightly lowering the volume to, there's no hidden secrets here, to about 12 sets for the big muscle groups of chest, back, front of the thighs, back of the thighs, and 9 sets for arms. And the reason why the volume dropped by about 3 sets and 4 to 8 sets respectively is because we had one goal and one goal only, and that was progressive. By the way, if you're like one of my regular clients, you could have tuned out of this a long time ago unless you just want to see me faff about. Progressive resistance training. Our goal over these first 6 months of year 2 was to do whatever we could to get the weights to go up, to get him as strong as we possibly could get him. Now, the one thing you might understand about the leather daddy is he may very well love to party, but part of his party plan did not involve the usage of anabolic steroids. And if you don't use steroids, and if you do use steroids, this is true, but it's very especially true if you don't use steroids. Your ability to jack the weight up with good form, keeping tension on the right muscles and off the wrong muscles, is the number one way you're going to get bigger. I'll go into that more later. That's a whole different video. But we had to spend the first 6 months lowering his volume and increasing the amount of weight he lifted, which meant he couldn't do the same volume because how the hell is he going to recover from it? Right? That's why you don't see powerlifters use the same volume as, say, a bodybuilder, because all they do is lift heavy weights. So, well, that's not true. They also do repetition work, but whatever. They also do light explosive work. But you get the point. They can't recover from their workouts, and neither could the leather man when he was lifting heavy. So for the first 6 months of year 2 of P730X, we focused on getting his weights up. The next 6 months, we hooked him up with a bodybuilding nutrition coach who happened to be a registered dietitian. And because he was now working on getting as lean as possible, our goal with the next 6 months was to maintain as much strength and muscle as we could. And funny enough, he actually made some gains in this. I think it's because he was on such a high protein diet. Maintain as much strength and muscles, dumbass, as much strength and muscles over the next 6 months as we could. But we also had to up the volume because we were using lighter weights, because he's simply not lighter like real light like he was pumping. He was still lifting relatively heavy. Once a week, he still did exercises as low as 5 to 6 reps for each major muscle group to maintain some of it. He had to maintain his strength, not let it all go away. So let's be clear, I'm getting on such a rant. 1 day a week for each major muscle group, he dropped on one exercise. One exercise, one time a week, he dropped the reps as low as 5 to 6 sets, 5 to 6 reps for at least 2 of the sets. So that way he can maintain as much of his strength. Everything couldn't be within this 10 to 15 rep range, because what I learned from experience in training previous non-leather men is if you don't do this, even during a diet phase, at least one time a week for each major muscle group, for a 5 to 6 reps, 2 sets, you're going to lose too much strength. And for a non-steroid user, you're going to lose the primary thing which helps you build muscle, which is progressively lifting heavier and heavier weights. So he worked with the nutritionist, and we used that program, and what we did was worked all the planes and ranges of motion. This is still running, sorry. It is still running because I rant forever, 36 minutes, yes. So he was working with the nutritionist, and we simply designed his routine this way. Now remember, this guy was self-employed, so he could pull this off. He could show up at the gym. We did a 3 days on, 1 day off routine, and after every third week, once he finished the whole complete cycle, we took an extra day off. This was something we came up because of his specific need state. I don't really want to get into this too much. Maybe we can talk, because it's already gone on long enough. So what happened was, on Monday, he would work chest, shoulders, and tris. On Tuesday, he would work legs. On Wednesday, he would work back and buys. And here's my little trick. This is one thing I didn't, you can see that I'm coming out. One little thing is, the only thing he did for shoulders, again, this has no application to my regular clients, so tune off and go eat your 2 chocolate cookies and your protein shake right now. We did anterior and medial delts in this shoulder day, and we did rear delts and traps on this shoulder day. So basically we divided his shoulders up into 2 main groups, pull shoulders and push shoulders. And that actually evened the volume out. So we did his chest exercises, then we did an anterior delt and a medial delt for his shoulders on this day, a rear delt and a traps for shoulders on that day, and then that mixed with back and buys, that was legs right there. He would take a day off, and then repeat the cycle all over again. What we later found out was that, especially as the diet got harder and tighter, as he got leaner and leaner, this is very funny. What we found is, as he got leaner and leaner and he got closer and closer to the big leather bands, we actually need to take more time off. We need to back off his routine a little bit by every third week taking an extra day off. We add to, and what that means in English was, we would do, for every third week, we just skip a day. So say, for example, the cycle would be, I'm not getting too long on this, whatever. If you want to watch this, you watch it. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday was off. Friday was chest, Saturday was legs, Sunday was back and buys, and then Monday was off. So all we did was, once we got past the third week and we got to that second off day, we just took an extra day off. This is very important that I bring this up. That as his program intensified, and as he got leaner, his diet coach actually gave him a less strict diet, because his body began to fight back really hard. So this was interesting. What the diet coach did and what I did as the personal trainer was, I began to work days off in his routine more. And most people, when they start getting leaner and the weight starts going down slower and they start feeling more worn down, what do? They work harder. They add in extra workouts. They add in extra time. They cut even more calories, thinking, oh, my weight is full. I got to cut more calories to do more cardio to lose more weight. And then all they do is they fail extra hard. Because as the body begins to adapt, you have to work with it. Your body will begin to adapt and you have to work with it, not against it, because you will always lose. Your body is working off a millions of year old system designed to prevent you from starving to death. And that's all it thinks that a Leatherman diet is a unannounced famine. So to conclude this video, because it's been going too goddamn long, the last 6 months as we went through that bodybuilding program, I was throwing in days off all the time. I'd have him send me, because there was no email back then, I'd have him phone call me, give me a phone call. And I'd say, hey, how you feeling? Like, I'm really worn out. And I went and did this, and it worked today, and it got worse and worse. Here's the key. The more I moved, the worse I felt. Whereas the exact opposite usually happens. If movement's going to be the thing you need, you usually feel better the more you move. The more he got out of bed that morning, the worse he felt. I'd say, all right, randomly just throw a day off. And he's like, are you serious? I'm like, dude, do you feel, and this is my thing, I learned this from Lee Haney said this once, do you feel like a block of wood today? And he said, yes. I said, you need to take the day off. He goes, but I'm like the most intense part of my training. I said, exactly. I understand it's counterintuitive. And this is why when you try to do this before with other trainers, you wind up failing and getting hurt. Because you need to understand that as the training program intensifies, you have to work with your body more than ever. You cannot force feed it. His nutritionist had him take whole days at maintenance. I remember at one point, he was maybe like 6 weeks out from the big leather dance. And he spent an entire week eating maintenance calories. I remember freaking out. He's like, oh, am I going to gain weight? I said, no. You're at maintenance calories, so by definition, you're going to maintain your weight. You know what happened to him? He lost 3 pounds that week. Because by finally giving his body some calories for more than just 24 hours, he gave his body extra calories for whatever it is in a week, 148 hours, whatever the hell that is. I really suck at math, by the way. Because he gave his body extra calories for 148 hours, the stress response his body had to this unprovoked famine lessened, and he actually dropped a bunch of water weight, because one of the things your body does as part of the stress response, it causes you to retain water. So when he went on maintenance calories for a week, I think it was like 6 weeks out or maybe 4 weeks out from the big leather dance, he actually lost 3 pounds while eating maintenance calories. Because again, he wasn't losing fat, he was eating maintenance calories, but his body was lessening the levels of stress, and therefore he lost water weight. That's a big thing. This whole push-pull, whole body, then push-pull for the first year, and then push-pull getting as strong as possible, and then maintain as much of that strength as possible by doing at least one exercise once a week for each major muscle group, 2 sets, 5 to 6 reps, trying to keep at least as heavy weight as he could. I'm starting to ramble now. Right, don't maintain the strength in his muscle. But to a certain point, the leaner he got, the more we had to back off. And I know there's a lot of great coaches who talk about this. I actually got a chance to see this in action. And a lot of it at that point was done on the fly. The 1 week he felt like wood, his nutritionist gave him like 2 or 3 days of maintenance, and it did the trick. But the further he got into the diet, well, most people would diet harder and do more cardio. He actually went on maintenance calories for a week and lost more weight. He actually looked better because he wasn't retaining a bunch of water. So that's it. The goal was achieved. You all know what a leather daddy is. I hope I qualified the idea of 5s and 7s. I really better qualify that because that's vitally important. In order to deal with the adaptive response that your body gives you to building muscle, you need to do a certain volume of exercise. But that volume must be done at a certain frequency. The overall number, say 9 sets of chest a week, have to be done in 7 days. And you want to, as a beginner, you want to spread that out throughout the week. I talked about core training that's going to require its whole, but Jesus Christ, I ranted for 45, let's just, I live alone. I've literally ranted for 45 minutes and there's been nothing in this house but me and a whiteboard. So what do you think a core video is going to take? So we address the bare bones of it. Poke, squeeze, stabilize, protect the flexible rod while the rigid levers of death do their job. Right? I'll give you a perfect example. This will be a nice way to segue into the core. So this thing right here, I don't know if you see this, but this is the hammer of Valente. All right, now I keep this on my mantle because it's friggin' awesome. Think of this like your femur, your leg bone. Think of this like your arm bone. Think of this like your tibia, your shin bone. It is rigid and hard, and it's built to deliver force. Notice it's way less thin. That was really provocative, especially in a Leatherman lecture, but you get the point. Way less thin than this, because this is where the force gets delivered through. But please notice the rigid lever that it gets used through. Now imagine if this was a flexible rod, this wouldn't be able to do nearly the damage it could do. In fact, it would actually destroy this. If this was a pool noodle and I went like this and went to go smash the computer Gallagher style, watermelon flying all over the place, this thing would not nearly impact the amount of force, and it would destroy this. It would just rupture this, right? So think of this like your spine. Your spine's a flexible rod. The muscles around your core brace and tighten to turn this pool noodle into a solid wooden handle. Right? If I hit you with just this, it would hurt. That then allows this, your tibia, femur, humerus, your arm bone, your leg bone, your shin bone, to exert force, but you need a stable, rigid lever, and since the spine ain't that, it's a flexible rod, it needs the muscles around it to, this is really getting provocative, to really wrap around it, to create it, to make it a stiff lever, all right? So this is the hammer of Valente, and you can see very well how that works. So that's your core training lecture that will come up, but that's my brief tutorial in core. Oh, and then I just went over the Leatherman's program again. Remember, if you're a regular, average, everyday client who just wants to build a little muscle, who wants to be functionally independent for as long as possible, life happens, who wants to be a little harder to kill, people with a little more muscle mass, or a little harder for diseases and, frankly, other people to kill, you don't need anything that I went over in the second half of this video. Just follow the damn whole body routine. If you want to do different planes and ranges of motion, because they're specific to some activity you want to do, then fantastic. But they're not necessary. Where they well, they are kind of necessary. Where they really shine, though, is when you want to maximally develop a muscle. Because again, if you're going to take the Leatherman from the whole body routine to the push-pull, you need to work every plane, right, and range that the muscles work through to maximally develop it. If you're a powerlifter, you're concerned about building strength through specific planes and ranges of motion. You don't need to bother yourself, unless you're training for muscle balance, doing all types of angles and ranges. Same would go, I'd imagine, for an Olympic weightlifter. Unless they're doing it to prevent injury or develop muscle balance to a degree so they don't drop the bar. They don't need as an extensive variety of exercises as the Leatherman needed. But that's it. So let me end this video with this today, because that already went on too long. I've already violated Devin's rule, my fitness video consigliere, and she's right, but I can't help myself. I like to listen to myself speak. I'm going to keep looking for that damn ingredient for the high-protein cookie. If it comes in, we're making friggin' high-protein cookies. If it doesn't come in, I'm going to take the cereal. Oh, if there's any questions relative to this, I'll answer them. If not, we'll do the core training video next week. I think that'd be awesome. And I can go into not just the local core exercise, we already kind of did, but we can also go into how to do isolated core exercise. And when doing isolated core exercise is actually necessary, even though people don't move in isolated parts. But that's it. Let me end this right now. God, 48 minutes. Rob Valente's right. This like literally is like Game of Thrones on a shitty budget. But that's it. I will talk to you all later, and goodbye.